Parents with nanny cams, what have you caught your babysitter doing? This was my equivalent of pre-K. All the kids were regressing in their movement ability and getting really fat, so they set up spy equipment. Turns out one carer was doubling every baby's food portions and forcefully overfeeding them. Wish I had a nanny cam. My stepsister was watching my brother with disabilities for me. She would dump out the contents of his capsules meds and use them later. Didn't find out about it till he started having seizures constantly and ended up in the hospital for the second time. This isn't a bad one. My parents caught the babysitter carrying our 60-pound golden retriever like he was a baby. Once, at the very last moment when no other babysitter was available, I hired one that is sorta notorious for not being good, not dangerous or anything like leaving the child unattended, but like the type where she would not console the child if they were crying, punish them for doing small things. While away I was very suspicious, so I continuously was glancing at the baby cam. The babysitter was playing with him, singing songs and completely engaging him well beyond the way you would expect somebody who was considered a bad babysitter to act. Essentially, what happened was the babysitter got hired by a crazy parent who didn't like her at all, so they spread a bunch of mumbo-jumbo through the neighborhood. When I came home I gave her a very large tip, and she was the one I always hired whenever I needed a babysitter. TDLR, at the last moment hired a babysitter that was rumored to be bad. Turns out she was a really good babysitter who once got hired by a crazy parent who didn't like her, so they spread a bunch of BS. Not a nanny cam because this happened in the 90s and I don't think we had them in Scotland then, but my mum came home early one day because she had become suspicious of our nanny as my sister, and I never slept after a day with her. She found both my sister and I in bed in the middle of the day. Turned out my nanny had been dosing us up with child medicine to make us sleep all day so she could sit and do nothing. This isn't an answer, more of an additional question, but how much of the video do parents with nanny cams watch? Or do they watch them on speed playback and adjust the speed to normal if they see something suspicious or noteworthy? My mom put a nanny cam on my sister's bedroom. The only disturbing thing my mom allegedly saw was the babysitter crying while holding my sister. Turns out the babysitter just had a miscarriage the day before. Well, a case which happened near where I live. Woman used to work, husband out of country. Had a 2-year-old kid. They hired a nanny to look after him during daytime. Day by day kid started looking malnourished. So she set up a spy cam. Apparently the lady used to bring her kid and feed him all the food left for the kid she was supposed to babysit. Then she would feed the kid cheap biscuits. She was promptly handed over to police. My story isn't that interesting, but I have a camera to check in on my rabbit when I'm not there. The biggest surprises were mostly just how almost nobody followed my pet sitting instructions. The one exception, ironically, was my brother, who claimed to hate the rabbit and always wanted to get rid of it. I got an alert one day that my camera had detected movement while my bro was there taking care of him, and I decided to take a peek. I opened the app connected to the camera and saw my bro walk into my room, lay on the floor, and start playing with my rabbit. It just warmed my heart. A friend caught his nanny hitting their kid for interrupting that day's binge of the TV show Friends. I travel the US for work, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to bring my 2 beagles with me. They have never been away from my side longer than the time I've been at work. They are 10 and 13. I have a camera that I use to check in on them sometimes, mostly because my larger beagle is quite the ingenious guy. Opening doors, scooting chairs over places so he can jump up onto the counters, etc. etc. Last year I was in Oregon and had to go home to Michigan for an emergency. I do not fly with them, I will only drive. So I was in a pickle and reluctantly hired someone off of Rover that was willing to come stay over at my hotel room for 3 days. She was great, kept up on texting me about the dogs, said things like tossing them a ball right now. So I would check in via the cam when I thought it was appropriate. This woman was amazing. Not only was she playing with them enough to make them exhausted, she was even teaching them new tricks, making them use their brains to solve puzzles, and even got my 42-pound beagle to get up on her back so she could do push-ups. She was an avid CrossFitter. I was extremely happy. A little late to the party, but here goes. My mom suspected our maid of stealing the silverware. And she's just fucking nosy. Anyway, the maid was indeed stealing the silverware. I think that ended up being overshadowed by my dad fucking her, though. Thanks for the gold. Who knew my dad's infidelity would one day pay off? Not me, but my aunt's friend set up a nanny cam because she noticed that every time she changed her child's diaper the child would start crying a lot more than usual. Turns out when they watched the nanny change her diaper, she would use Clorox wipes if they were nearby instead of grabbing the baby wipes. Edit: for anyone wondering what happened afterward, they fired the nanny immediately and the father became a stay-at-home dad. We have a security camera in my bedroom for my free roam bunny so we can keep an eye on her whilst on work, if we go on holiday. Well, my dad is 50 and is a big bloke who acts like he doesn't like pets. Came over to visit one day whilst I was out. He went in my room and crouched down calling the bunny, He spent an hour trying to pet the rabbit and kept repeating in a soft voice, "I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to pet you and see how fluffy you are." He just about shit himself when I spoke through the security camera to tell him she's very fluffy. Edit: thank you for my first gold. My family bought one to see our dogs when we leave on vacation twice a year. It's one where they can hear us and we thought it'd be great. We hardly used it. We also asked our maid to dog sit for us while we were out. Once when we looked at the feed we saw the dog sitter there a solid 30 minutes early just petting the dogs and playing with them. She's since retired from working, but she was the sweetest old lady and we love her. Another time my dad left a wad of cash on top of the washing machine, about $600, and she put a rubber band around it with a note saying he misplaced it. We once caught the nanny putting charcoal to feed them as a snack. This woman claimed that she thought it was a snack. It was in a charcoal box. My brothers were for chasing my cats around with a broom, hitting them. She's since been fired. My grandpa was staying with my parents but they figured it best to hire the regular sitter to watch my younger siblings overnight since they didn't think my grandpa was up to the task and they were attending a wedding a couple hours away and made plans to spend the night in a hotel nearby. They had set up a nanny cam in a couple room, my siblings' bedroom, the master bedroom, living room and kitchen. All motion activated. They normally wouldn't bother looking through the footage if everything seemed fine upon returning home and their master bedroom cam had never been triggered before. When they returned they noticed that the cam in the master bedroom had been triggered, so they decided to take a look. Cut to footage of my grandpa and the sitter both naked aggressively making out from the entrance of the room, staggering while intertwined towards the bed, and then about 20 minutes of banging on my parents' bed. The sitter was about 20 years old and my grandpa was around 70 at the time. My dad called me immediately after he saw the footage, laughing his ass off, and I could hear my mom crying in the background, completely mortified from what she had just witnessed and shouting at my dad to throw out the sheets and kick out grandpa. My mom called the sitter to confront her and she just apologized and said there was connection or some shit to that matter. When she asked my grandpa what he was thinking, he just said, "At my age you must seize every opportunity." I wish there was audio for the build-up. I lay awake at night sometimes just wondering what kind of game my grandpa was talking to get in that sitter's pants. The couple I sat for had a nanny cam in their living room, the kind that went in bears. They got me on video giving their 2-yo the Heimlich after he tried to eat a rock. We have a nanny cam and we caught our nanny dancing with our baby, making him laugh and giving him kisses. She's the best and the cameras gave us the peace of mind to know she really treats him like her own. I pay my neighbor to feed the stray cats in my garden when I'm away for days at a time, and the camera caught my neighbor trying to come in by pole bamboo vaulting one time. He nailed it, amazingly. Not mine, but my friends. We watched her daughter's nanny playing with her, singing to her and just being so lovely. She was so good, that all the others' moms wanted to hire her. I got a nanny cam to keep an eye out for my elderly grandfather, especially when the homemaids were there. My grandfather started asking for lots of cash and couldn't remember what was happening to it. A brooch that my aunt was supposed to get disappeared, and then I heard reports of my grandfather being inappropriate with some of the home health aides. He was busted squirreling away his medication that he was supposed to be taking in his chair, giving money to an aide and sexually harassing another aide. We didn't have a nanny cam, but my mom set up the camcorder when she suspected our babysitter was stealing. And then caught the babysitter stealing. She returned most of the stuff when my mom threatened to report her to the police. I think she should still have reported her anyway. Now she probably just went on stealing at other people's places. This isn't something that I caught a babysitter doing, but I remember that I once saw on TV the case of some parents that went with her baby to the doctor because she cried a lot for apparently no reason. The doctor told them that she looked really stressed and asked them if they were doing something that could make her act like that. They didn't. Then the doctor and the parents noticed some really tiny dots in the girl's belly and they had no idea where they came from. The babysitter told them that she had no idea, but they didn't believe her and secretly put cameras to spy what she was doing. Turns out that she was crazy. She was stabbing the baby with a needle from time to time and doing things like shaking her cradle incredibly hard to torment her. Of course, they called the police, confronted her, and she got arrested. The family I nanny for told me that their previous nanny got caught doing loads of awful things. The couple that outraged me most were one leaving their 3-year-old daughter in the tub with water up to her chest for 2 hours every day while she sat in another room unable to see said child. And 2 once she went to run an errand with the same kid, and their doorbell camera caught her putting kid in car seat, not buckling her, and peeling off. The mom said you could see toddler trying to buckle herself in before they took off. Edit 1. The camera was not in the bathroom, it was where they were able to see where the nanny was, room near bathroom and their kid if the door was left open, which it always was while she was bathing. 2. They thought she was a perfectly good nanny until their kid was saying weird things that were going on and they decided to watch the footage. They fired her after seeing what she was doing, and that's where I super nanny came in. The cameras weren't actually for the nanny. They were for their kids' therapists because she was prone to violent behavior and they were trying to fix it blah blah blah. My aunt has a nanny cam and found my older cousin's babysitter playing blackjack with lost $50 lol. I have caught her making pillow forts that are heavily resistant to the monsters that may or may not come out during heavy thunderstorms with my kiddo. 20 minutes after bedtime, needless to say, she was dealt with appropriately. I'm not a parent, rather the child, and I had this nanny, or yaya as we would call it. It became useless because she soon found out and kept unplugging the camera. It turns out she was slowly stealing money from my family. We fired her. I was the child and there weren't any nanny cams, but my parents had left a small bucket of toys and things to keep me busy, and they hired a babysitter to watch me while they both had to take overtime at work and knew they would be gone most of the day. The babysitter moved that bucket of toys to another room, put me in a crib and proceeded to go off and read or something, and left me there for hours with nothing to do, only coming back to check on me or feed me. My parents came back to me just sadly sitting in my crib. Indoor cameras hooked up to the same unit as the outdoor cams. Husband was walking to his study, saw a giant huntsman spider Australian here and screamed like a little girl and jumped away. Needless to say, I bolted to the computer to watch the playback on repeat for a few minutes. I laughed so hard I had an asthma attack. I think that was the first time he ever called me a cunt, sarcastically I will add. She stole a single puzzle piece of what we were trying to solve. Saw her put it in her pocket. Final straw was one of our fucking potted plants. What I learned today: Redditors have more dogs than kids, if not equal. I'm glad I stopped babysitting before cameras became a thing. A couple I sat for had adorable kids, but the dad had one room in the house devoted to a full model railroad setup. Dozens of trains, bridges, teeny villages, the works. After they went to bed, and during that long boring stretch before the parents came home, I'd just play with the train set. Only regret is that I couldn't toot the horns because the kids would have busted me. Not a parent and not a nanny cam, but my uncle once set up a wildlife camera, the ones that hunters use to get a photo if something happened in my great-grandmother's apartment. She was very demented, so she told us incoherent stories about how there were people there, stealing all her liquor and chocolates. Turns out she was the one who stole the goodies, but we also found out her other son, my other uncle who no one has contact with due to his shady actions with his wife, had a key to the apartment and was regularly visiting at midnight to steal some jewelry. Friends of ours don't have kids but have dogs. They were going out of town and told the dog sitter about all of the cameras, including the one that is outside but sometimes picks up reflections and will actively notify them of motion. The dog sitter seemed to get it, but she forgot to convey that to her boyfriend, who came out and walked around naked quite a bit. I was the caught in camera a few times. A family who had bunnies caught me on camera booping noses to the beat of the song I was singing. Little bunny foo-foo hopping through the kitchen, picking up all the lettuce and munchy munchy munch too. A different family saw me get fucking tackled by their 95-pound mastiff puppy, and they immediately called me to make sure I didn't have a concussion since I just kinda laid there for a while. I was fine, I just got the wind knocked out of me. 3. Yet another different family saw me reading a book to their kids, and later complimented all the voices I make. I had no idea they could hear audio and I got so embarrassed, since I really did go all out. I dog sit for some neighbors, one of which told me she has a camera in the living room dining room for her dogs. You know those ones that dispense treats? Anyways, I thought it was a strange essential oil diffuser until she told me what it was. I was being paid to play with them for an hour, but she found out that I was actually staying for 2 or 3 hours. When she asked me about it, I think I said something like I'd want someone to do the same for my dog. Ever since then she leaves me treats in the kitchen and even got me a Christmas present from the dogs. She picked up our pug Doogie and was dancing around the living room with him while that "Hey, I Just Met You" song was playing. My uncle told me this once when a babysitter was holding his daughter, my older cousin, when she was a baby. The baby was playing with her toys and she somehow swallowed a small piece of something and the babysitter performed the Heimlich, but for babies there's a version of that for babies. I'd where I found it though. She saved my cousin and her family was thankful. They have no idea where the babysitter is now, but right now she's supposed to be around her late 40s. Edit 1. I asked my uncle about this and apparently they know where the babysitter is. She is in California and she is a very well-paid doctor and makes over $310,000 a year physician. That's the only thing he knows since she left. Edit 2. Thank you for the silver, kind stranger. Not a nanny cam, but the video baby monitor managed to catch our then 1.5-month-old projectile vomiting on me, and then straight up into the mouth and on the face of my husband 2 minutes later. When she put my daughter down for her nap, she took a nap on the bed next to her. Edit. This isn't a bad thing at all. Different beds. 2-year girl who still needs a 90-minute power nap in the middle of the day. I just thought it was funny when I turned on the camera and saw them both napping. Caught the babysitter masturbating on our couch. The babysitter was still my female cousin. I figured the best thing was to just say nothing, save the awkwardness. She did it a fair amount. I then mentioned our house cam by accident some months later and her face dropped. I realized what I'd said, then casually threw in that I'd never checked it, again, to save the awkwardness. A colleague of mine saw that, when his 8-month-old baby cried, the nanny just ignored him and kept watching reality TV, not paying any attention to him while he bawled his eyes out. She did not attempt to console him or anything, she just tried to hear the TV. There were a few other troubling instances too, like she'd say they went on a brief stroll but disappeared for hours with no explanation, or she didn't follow the parents' instructions on how to put him to sleep and let him cry, and my colleague realized that the baby was anxious and desperate every time the nanny arrived. Heartbreaking really. Not a nanny cam, but a vid. My sil sat the camera down thinking she turned it off. I have over an hour of her teasing my toddler in a mean way with candy and popsicles. She started telling him that he would get some, then held it just out of reach. She then ate it in front of him making sounds. She was also calling him mean and weird names like Dirt Muncher, and Ricky Retardo. The camera got all the audio, but only some video. At the end of the video is when we got home. When I confronted her with the video, she started claiming I doctored it. I was a liar, an asshat, and hated her because she was prettier than my wife. She is not. That was the last time she was allowed around either of our kids unsupervised. She was the sil for 10-ish years, and is now the crazy Karen ex-sil. I can't have a presence on social media because she attacks me all the time, says lies etc. I am also estranged from my brother because of her. 10 years of her warped his perception of our family. He still thinks some of the whacked out things she accused our dad, sister, other brother, and various other family members of. No reasoning has convinced him of the truth, not even the thought that if video evidence refutes some of the claims, then all can be considered suspect. I may get comments and advice of what I could do, but in the end you can't fight crazy, and sometimes life is just not fair. The only thing I have done to make things better is ignore her. She eventually just starts attacking someone else like an annoying yipping dog, that just needs to annoy. As for my brother, I hope time will help to fix things. I also think that he might just be more like her than I think. Birds of a feather fly together. Sitting on our couch playing with the dogs like we paid them to. We hired a dog sitter over the Thanksgiving holidays to check on the pooch, feed the cats, get the mail, etc. Edit Def pointed out the various security cams to her. She asked if she could bring her sister along for company. We said sure, no problem. The sister, we found out in conversation, attends a nearby hyper-conservative fundamentalist school. When the hired sitter took the dog out and the fundy sister had the house to herself, she took the opportunity to scream fuck at the top of her lungs a few times. Not a lot else. Just paced around the living room dropping high decibel F-bombs. Gotta find some way to vent that fundy angst. Watched her outside playing with my dogs. She was dog sitting. Our yellow Labrador and golden retriever puppy started munching the blueberries right now off our blueberry bushes. They know damn well they're not supposed to get into the blueberry patch. We watched our dog sitter run over to them and try to get them to stop. She then ran inside, and ran back out with a bowl. She proceeded to race the dogs for the blueberries. Had to be one of the highlights of our trip. We came home to a bowl of blueberries in the fridge and 2 very guilty puppers. There are cameras around my grandmother's house. She has dementia and is taken care of by nurses. One beat her up for a whole minute. Nurse knew there were cameras and didn't care. Obviously got fired. We live in a shitty country with shitty laws. We weren't allowed to press charges or any of the sort. Playing Uno using bullshit house rules. My friend is a nanny and sometimes she takes the small human she watches and has her dance for the parents randomly in front of the camera or wave since it is a Google Hub and has photos of the parents. Small gifts for the parents to find if they review the video from that day. My babysitter is 100 cool. My husband's goddamn cat gets on the goddamn dining room table that she knows she is not allowed on as soon as she hears the car leave the driveway. Little snit. Not my kids, but my sister's. This was when my nephew was still very young and my sister was still breastfeeding. Long story short, my sister caught the babysitter drinking her breast milk. She had her suspicions because my nephew would go through twice as much milk when the babysitter was taking care of him. My sister set up the camera and caught the guy in the act. Apparently the guy was some sort of fitness nut and had read that breast milk can be very beneficial. As weird as it sounds, my sister ended up working out a deal with the guy. She got him to drop the price of watching the kid in exchange for a bit of breast milk every now and again. Not me, but my aunt and uncle had CCTV cams installed in the house. One of them caught their nanny sexually abusing my toddler cousin and their 1-year-old or so baby. This was a few years ago. Luckily they were young enough to not have very lasting memories. Jesus, I hope so. The parents sent them to experts for therapy sessions, So I hope there are little to no lasting damage. Edit. My grammar was horrendous.